Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Believeland Prep Podcast. I am your host, Derek Dimmitt, with my esteemed co host, Cameron Palmer, and our special guest for this week for a Buckeye breakdown, Ohio State reporter for Believeland Media, Alek Koberna. Alek, welcome to the show. You're our first, well, no, not our first guest, but it's been a while
No,
since
far
we've
from
had
it.
one, so
That is true. Our first
Either
since
way,
high
I'm
school
still
sports
honored to
started.
be on here.
yes, very well. And we will have Alec on for a couple more guest spots, just breaking down some Buckeyes football for us and previewing some of the bigger games. With the season starting this week, we wanted to get him on to discuss the lead up to the season as well as kind of previewing this opening week in Indiana. So, Cameron, go ahead and get us started with your question.
I'm curious. I feel like you might know a little bit more than maybe the average fan, like myself and maybe Derek. I'm not sure how deep he is,
I
but
would like to hope so sometimes.
Yes.
who's going to be the starting quarterback? Who do you think it is?
So, isn't that the question? I mean, every
It
sports
is.
writer, every fan's asked it, every analyst on ESPN to Fox to CBS, that everybody wants to know: is it Devin Brown? Is it Kyle McCord? And I think the big thing we all have to keep in mind, no matter who Ryan Day picks, one, he's sticking with that guy. If we learned anything from Kyle McCord versus CJ Stroud, he made his decision. Despite some struggles early on in the year, he stuck to that decision after sitting Stroud against Akron 2 years ago to help heal an injury, which was the excuse on why he had struggled in those first three games. Sat him for Akron, came back and went off for Heisman level performances, finished out the season. Ryan Day has not yet missed on a quarterback at Ohio State. He has sent guy after guy not only to New York for Heisman competitions, but has sent three straight guys in the first round to the NFL at the quarterback position. He doesn't miss. He is a quarterback whisperer. That's what he was hired as under Urban Meyer. That is why he was given the head coaching position. He's a quarterback whisperer. Whichever guy he goes with, we just have to believe in Ryan Day until he misses. Now, on who that is going to be, speculation has been for the last year since we knew CJ Stroud was going to the NFL draft that it was going to be Kyle McCord. That was Ryan Day's guy. That was his preference. We didn't see Devin Brown in the spring game. He sat out with an injury. He got surgery this offseason, and that's kind of why everyone kind of expected as we got into this summer and now into fall camps that it was going to be Kyle McCord. Now the big thing we look at is how much has Devin Brown done behind closed doors that this competition is so close and Ohio State fans haven't seen him throw a football, let alone in a scrimmage, but in an actual football game such as the spring game where you have pressure coming at you, where there is a threat of interceptions and sacks and thousands of people around you. Clearly, this young Devin Brown is doing something very special behind these closed doors to keep this competition as close as it is. So, like I said, whichever way we go, you have to trust Ryan Day because he has two special talents back there, and Devin Brown has made this really interesting over the last couple weeks. Also, has made it kind of a pain in the rear for me as I'm trying to get this season going and talk about Ohio State. I don't know who the quarterback is. Nobody outside of maybe Ryan Day himself knows who this quarterback is, and he said we're going to see them both against Indiana. There's a chance we see them both against Youngstown. Oh, there's a good chance we see them both against Youngstown State. It would make sense to see them both play in these first 2 weeks. Come week 3, though, Western Kentucky, the starter is going to be named, and whoever that is going to have to go guns blazing because they got Notre Dame coming up the week after.
Great, definitely. And on piggybacking off of Cameron's question, sometimes it's said if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks because neither one has really, separated himself from the other. Do you think that's the case with this, or do you think this is more Devin Brown, maybe performing at a level that wasn't expected this early in his collegiate career, and he's making the decision harder and we legitimately have two quarterbacks that can start day one.
So with that, yeah, I think this has to be 100% Devin Brown making this thing interesting. Kyle McCord has had now 3 years in this system to earn this starting job, and now all of a sudden you got this Devin Brown who no one was really talking about maybe getting this nod uh, prior to January. when we knew C.J. Stroud was gone, there was just this like, oh, so Kyle McCord is going to be the next guy all last season. That was what was expected. Then as you got closer to the spring game, you heard about this young Devin Brown. You knew he was supposed to be number 2 on this depth chart, and yet all throughout summer, every conversation has been Devin Brown this, Devin Brown that, and some people don't like him, some people love him, especially since he's wearing a non-traditional quarterback number out there wearing, I think it's 33. People don't like the look of it, but clearly this guy has something special, the confidence to go out there, wear a non-traditional number, take criticism early in his career. I think that might be the most important thing we have seen out of summer and fall camps to this point. Devin Brown chose something that the Buckeye fans don't necessarily like, and that is non-traditional anything. Buckeye fans are so engraved in tradition, and he goes out there and goes, I'm going to go honor this guy I looked up to as a kid. I'm going to wear number 33. He's taking criticism early on from every Ohio State fan, analyst. I mean, he got everyone to talk about him because of a number. That shows how special this kid is and, might potentially turn out to be here, because he took all that criticism, and while, we don't see him week to week and every day and see how the progressions are going, clearly even that tiniest bit of noise from something so minor hasn't affected him, and he's been able to just sit through and fight Kyle McCord, a 3-year member of this system, and has gone toe-to-toe with him. And from what I've seen in just clips here and there, they both throw it a little bit differently. Devin Brown, he's more of a, I'll say, Aaron Rodgers type of an arm. He's just going to zip it in there every time he throws. It's on a line. It is just, he has tremendous arm power for short yardage and medium yardage throws. We haven't seen many deep balls out of both guys. And then with Kyle McCord, I mean, we all saw him against Akron. We know what he's made out of. We know what he can do. And so I think that right now this is Devin Brown making this interesting at this point, not Kyle McCord struggling. Yeah, 2 quarterbacks going to be a problem if we're going to make a run this season against Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, and even teams like, Purdue in there and Western Kentucky. You have to have your quarterback selected at some point in this season to solidify it and start getting these guys to build around them. I think that's a big thing. But no, at the moment we have 2 legitimate starters in Devin Brown and Kyle McCord, and it's going to be very interesting these first 2 weeks of the season against Indiana and Youngstown State.
What do you think it's like for the receivers in that room? Obviously, Marvin Harrison's coming back, and he had a tremendous year last year. Helped us get to where we ended the season. What do you think that's like, being a receiver in that wide receiver room, not knowing who you're going to be catching passes from, probably like in between drives, like maybe one drive it's McCord and the next is Devin Brown. What kind of process do you think that's like? What kind of challenge do you think that is for them?
Well, I think out of everyone in this room, the biggest challenge this is going in for is Marvin Harrison Jr. So he's going from C.J. Stroud last year, a Heisman candidate, and what was he, 2nd or 3rd overall in the NFL draft? I mean, the quarterback's taken, was just an outstanding talent. And now you look at who he has to go to, and it's either his high school teammate and Kyle McCord. So there's a built-in chemistry there, built-in friendship. All we've heard is these 2 guys have a great connection, which is a big reason why Kyle McCord has stayed in this competition, is because of Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think this is the hardest thing for Marvin Harrison, because obviously he wants to endorse his guy, his friend, his quarterback from high school, and that's the guy he wants to go with. That's the, unquestioned bond he has out there already. But for the rest of these guys, yeah, I mean, you're talking a different quarterback. Whenever you talk to wide receivers in the NFL, when they go from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr like Devontae Adams did, the biggest thing he said was, the ball just comes out differently. It's a different spiral. The ball's coming at you at a different speed. Maybe the best thing this is doing for these guys is they're going to have some great hands. Brian Hartline is an amazing wide receivers coach. Constantly having to adjust to how balls are coming at you is going to make these wide receivers even better. The mental game of it is definitely going to be a problem. Potentially these first 2 weeks, as they look to kind of build that chemistry from drive to drive, you're going to see some shaky throws, maybe some missed routes, missed throws here and there. I think we all expect that. I wouldn't be surprised if both of these quarterbacks end up with an interception because of this ongoing battle. But if you're a wide receiver out there in this system under Brian Hartline, you're ready to go. I mean, I don't think we can doubt Brian Hartline at this point. With as good as Buka and Harrison Jr. are, we're now hearing reports out of camp that this that the 4 freshmen they brought in are 2 of them are already at the level Marvin Harrison Jr. was at last season. And now we're talking about 2 guys in Igbuka and Harrison that could go top 10 in the NFL draft this year. These wide receivers are going to be good to go. No matter who is throwing them the football, they're going out there, they're making plays, they're going to get things done.
And you mentioned him there, Brian Hartline. He got that promotion of sorts up to offensive coordinator. Everything that I've read sounds like Day is still going to handle play calling. But do you think that with his success in the wide receiver room, as you just spoke, do you think that how do you think that translates over to the offense as a whole, maybe more than it has in the past couple seasons?
So going into this year with that success at the wide receiver group, I think is the one thing, especially when you're looking at preseason polls, that has kept Ohio State as high as they are, sitting number 3 behind Georgia and our rivals to the north. It is this wide receiver room. It is without a doubt the best wide receiver room in the nation and potentially in college football's history. I mean, we'll see as these guys progress and hit the field just how good this entire group has been. Especially with these freshmen that are going to be in this system for the next 2 years, and then they'll likely be first or second round picks in the draft. But this wide receiver room is going to make whoever ends up at quarterback's job super easy. People have said it for the last, 10 years since we had Urban Meyer join in, is the wide receivers at Ohio State make the quarterback look good. That's been the excuse every time we've sent a quarterback to the NFL and they're not all that. It's these wide receivers made the quarterback look good. The system makes the quarterback look good. That's the big thing. No matter who's starting, they have so many weapons, and we haven't even talked tight ends or running backs of this offense, just based off of the starting 3 guys you're putting out there on the field in Harrison, Julian Fleming, and Igbuka, of what this team could be. And you're not even talking about 2 deeps at this point, because that list just continues to go on and on of the talent that this team has under it. It's an entirely different aspect from what we've really seen at Ohio State. I mean, we've had great wide receivers recently with Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and the Jigba, of course. But what we have right now may be the pinnacle of Ohio State wide receiver play, the best we have ever seen. And I know we kind of say this going into every year, it's the best group ever at this position, but this is one of those groups that really is special. And if this team does end up going all the way, I think it does start and end with how this room performs. There's a lot of talk on how good they are. We saw last year when guys started getting injured, some of these younger guys got chances to play, and the offense stalled out. Now all of them have had another year. We only lose Jackson Smith and Jigba, and now it's go time. Now you get all these guys with all this hype ready to play.
So staying on the wide receiver room, freshman Brandon Innes, when do you think he worked his way into field of play, into playing? Obviously behind Igbuka, Fleming, and Marvin Harrison Jr., he's got to take a really big leap to see wide receiver 1 status. But when do you think in this season does he kind of make some noise and start getting more and more reps with the first team?
I'm going to back it up and say spring. I mean, we saw him in the spring game, and he went off. All the reports we've heard out of camps is him and Carnell Tate are absolute monsters, as well as Bryson and Noah Rogers. Both those guys, extreme talents as well. But you're going to see Innis on the field very early in this season, especially with Indiana, Western Kentucky, and Youngstown State in these first 3 games. They are going to get these guys out on the field. I can virtually guarantee that, because you're not keeping Harrison, Igbuka, and Fleming in these games. We saw what injuries did to this wide receiver room early last year. Ohio State's offense was plagued by them a year ago, and so we're going to have to use the depth that we are very fortunate to have. No other team in the nation can say that they can go as deep in wide receivers as the Ohio State University can this season. That's a big thing for them. You're going to see Innis taking snaps early in this season. There's a very good shot against Notre Dame. He's got some big-time plays, swapping in and out of the field. I believe from early depth charts we've seen put out, he is either wide receiver, I'll say X2. He is behind Marvin Harrison or Igbuka. So he is first man off the bench. Basketball, he's the 6th man. He's the first guy they're calling to come out on the field. Him, Xavier Johnson's the second guy in the slot, and then Carnell Tate's the next guy up as well.
And you made mention to some other skill players on offense. What's the running back situation looking like, and also tight ends? Because we do have that great wide receiver room, but we got to make it so defenses aren't just running out there in a dime formation and you know taking away that big weapon on the outside.
Well, I'll start this here with tight end room since we're going straight in from wide receivers. No, I'll swap it in a little bit. Look at this tight end room. And when you look at it, it's not as flashy. It is not as big, and oh my God, do we have talent galore. But reports out of fall camps, Cade Stover and G. Scott Jr., who are tight end 1 and 2, have taken tremendous strides this offseason and getting better, improving, and they're expecting a lot out of them. But maybe tight end number 3, true freshman, has kind of made more impact than I think we've seen out of a lot of other freshmen, especially at tight end. Jelani Thurman, the 6'6", 260-pound tight end, 5-star out of Fairburn, Georgia, was one of the biggest recruits Ohio State hit on in this last recruiting cycle. And from what we have heard so far, this dude is an absolute monster. I've wrote about it in a couple articles, I believe, already, that this guy has a legitimate chance to see the field in his freshman season, especially now that last couple years, we've had the rule that you can still redshirt someone and they can play in 4 games. That is huge for a guy like Jelani Thurman, who Ohio State is going to want to get on the field for the first time, maybe forever. Ohio State can go out there and get some goal line formations with 3 tight ends on the field, steal something out of Wisconsin's playbook and Minnesota, put 3 tight ends out there, and then they'll hand it off to this running back room or run some play action, and you will have countless threats on the field to make some big plays. And Jelani Thurman is one of the biggest players on this team that isn't on the offensive or defensive lines. He's going to be a huge threat for the Buckeyes in years to come. I know Cade Stover, I'm always up in the air about him from year in to year out. His consistency has been something that's lacked. We're hoping that goes up this year. Same with G. Scott Jr. But on into the running back room. That room, I think we kind of got blessed last year. We got to see pretty much everybody. Unfortunately, due to injuries. But we did get to see pretty much everybody, and everybody we saw impressed. I mean, it starts with Travion Henderson, but it doesn't end there. It goes for another 5 guys below him. He has been named, though, the number 1 starter. We also already did freshman year. He's now a junior. If he can get out of the injury bug, I think we all know where the ceiling for this guy is. It's in New York. There is a great chance. He was top 15 in Heisman voting preseason last year. The hype has died off after injuries. That just means he's ready for a breakout season. And the only thing maybe standing in the way of that is just how many guys are behind him. Because number 2 running back is Mayan Williams. We saw him a lot last year. Buckeye fans fell in love with this kid. Behind him, I believe we're going to see Evan Pryor. He has gotten really hit with the injury bug as of late, and we're hoping we can see him this season because he was one of those guys when he was brought in, you're like, this could be our next big Zeke Elliott type player who's going to go out there and make those impact plays day to day. Behind him, we've talked to Xavier Johnson in the wide receiver room, but we saw him at running back last year too when we needed some extra guys back there due to injury. From what we've heard, he is going to see kind of everything on the field, whether he's in the slot, lining up outside, at the running back spot. He's going to be kind of that Jalen Marshall and Curtis Samuel level player for Ohio State this season. They're going to use him wherever they feel they need him at that spot. So behind him, Chip training him. We saw him last season, had a couple of nice big games. You got T.C. Caffey and Dallin Hayden behind them. And both those guys, very young members of this system. But we saw last year again, I don't remember, I think it was against Kent State, they came in and just every time you gave the ball to someone in this system's hands, they were out there making big plays late in ball games. And I know you always say, oh, what can they do right at the gate? But Ohio State has to close games. We saw it against Georgia. We saw it against Michigan. It was close the whole way through. And in those final few drives, they gave it all away. That's what happened against the team to the north. They gave that away in the very end of that game. And that's something Ohio State, with all this experience now, can't have that same excuse.
What do you think the message has been from Ryan Day coming off the tough last year to Georgia as the ball dropped on New Year's Eve? What do you think the message has been now losing your starting quarterback from last year who got you there and played phenomenal in that bowl game? And just all the players that you lost to the draft. We lost some key players on the offensive line. DeJuan Jones probably being one of the biggest ones, height wise and play wise. And then losing the Jackson Smith and Jigba, just a lot of the key players. Except maybe our defense didn't seem to be hindered too much from the draft. I think we escaped the draft pretty well intact defensively. Just what do you think the message has been throughout camp and as we work into week 1 on Saturday?
The same message that Ohio State coaches have been giving players for the last 23 years. Since we saw Jim Tressel step on campus, it is next man up. Ohio State has kind of lived and breathed next man up mentality for the last 2 decades. Ryan Day's message didn't have to go out there and give some big, glorious Knute Rockne level speech. He had to walk in there and go, all right, who wants to go to the NFL? That's the big question you ask these guys when you walk in. And you saw it. Ohio State has used this line in hype video after hype video year after year. We don't want average. If you want to be average, you can go walk out the door. We don't want you here. That's Ohio State. We don't want average. We're going out there. We know these guys. They came in all as 5 and 4-star recruits, the best players in their states, the best players on their teams. There is no message that Ryan Day has to go in there and hype these guys up and get them ready. They should all be ready. They all know the expectations ahead of them. It is next man up.
And then, real quick before we wrap it up, the season does start this Saturday at 3:30 in Indiana on CBS, which we gotta get used to turning to CBS for some of these games after it having the SEC for much of all 3 of our lives. And then week 2, they're back home at the Shoe, welcoming Youngstown State. That's a noon kickoff on Big Ten Network. And then week 3, we've made mention to Western Kentucky visits the Shoe. That's at 4 on Fox. Just kind of looking at this Indiana game, they did it a few years ago with opening the season with a Big Ten opponent. How does that kind of change the mindset? Instead of starting with a team at the level of a Youngstown State, you're in the conference right from the get go.
Playing in conference is huge for Ohio State to start a season. And I think we've seen that when they have done it in the past. I think it was against Indiana. We opened on a Thursday night football game, and it was a different feel for this team to go out there, and it wasn't just easy right out of the gate. The big thing with Indiana is no, they're not going to beat Ohio State in this game unless Ohio State has an epic implosion and turn out to be the worst program we have seen since, the 90s. But what you get out of Indiana is they still have very talented recruits. They're going to have hard-hitting guys on defense that you won't see when we go up against Western Kentucky and Youngstown State to an extent. I mean, they still have their guys, and, you can check out the article to see who those guys are. There's plenty of them that can make plays. I'm a Youngstown State graduate. I've seen this team for the last 4 seasons. They got impressive guys down there, but they don't have the heavy hitters that teams like Indiana and Big Ten schools are going to have. They don't have the offensive lines that come in weighing at 2 tons, to snap these footballs. It enters into a different environment, especially on the road in week 1 in Bloomington, which hasn't been the hardest place to go into. I mean, Ohio State hasn't lost to Indiana since 1988. They won last year 56-14. They've won 27 matchups in a row, and they're favored by more than 4 touchdowns. That's exactly what this game is going to be. Indiana doesn't have a quarterback either. They're in the same position Ohio State is, except they're battling it out between 2 redshirt freshmen, and the defense should kind of feast on it. But like you said, they're going up against a Big Ten opponent in week 1. That's never going to be easy. It's a different level of preparation to get these guys ready, harder hitting, more physical than what you would get against a Kent State or an Arkansas State like we saw last year.
What are your final predictions for the year, kind of like record-wise? I know it's kind of hard to judge, especially not knowing who our quarterback is going to be come week 4 when it's time to play Notre Dame again. Just give me your long shot record right now.
Well, it's Ohio State, so, you have to say undefeated. The biggest things that stand in their way, truly, this season is themselves. From what we've seen on the field, off the field, over the last couple years, Ohio State wins and loses against themselves. They didn't lose to Georgia last year. They beat themselves. I mean, they got themselves in the spot to win, and unfortunately, Noah Ruggles, who had basically a perfect season, had a quarter of our points in the month of November season ago, goes out there and he misses in the biggest position of his career, and he lost out on a chance at the NFL because of it. Um, Michigan, they pulled away in that fourth quarter, but we were right there the whole way. And what we saw last year is kind of what Penn State fans have had to deal with for a while, of getting to that final quarter and then throwing it away against big time teams. They closed it early in the season against Notre Dame a season ago. But truthfully, the ceiling for this team is undefeated, national champions. It's going to come down to quarterback play and this offensive line. And truthfully, it comes down to this defense. We've heard a lot about the retooling this defense has had since Jack Sawyer has moved back to defensive end outside of the Jack spot. He has taken huge strides. He looks like the player we saw freshman year in the spring camp or spring game. I think it was 2-3 seasons ago when he went out there and got like 4 or 5 sacks in the spring game. So we're hoping for big things out of him come this season. But yeah, the ceiling undefeated, and I think everyone has kind of gone out there and looked at the floor of this team. And truthfully, I think the floor of this team is pretty low. There's a huge gap on where this season can go under Ryan Day in this year with young quarterbacks, new offensive line, but the talent is all there. It's one of the most difficult schedules they have had in a while, and I know people kind of look at this week by week and go, these should all be kind of blowout games. For the full in-depth, go read the articles. I mean, there's some real potential upset Brewers, especially in these first 6 games. Back 6 of the season, you have 3 top 25 opponents, 2 of them on the road. So this is a very challenging schedule for the Buckeyes this year. They're going to be tested in just about every way, whether they're going up against a high-level defense, a high-level offense, certain skill positions. They're facing something new every week of the season, and that's something we haven't really had to deal with in quite a while. So undefeated ceiling national championships, but truthfully, this team could also lose 4 games on the year. It just depends on what this team decides to be when they step on the field in Bloomington, Indiana this Saturday.
I think if they lose 4 games, there won't be any doubt that Ryan Day will be shown the door. But
Yeah,
we do thank you, Alek, for your time, for getting us ready for the Buckeye season. We will have Alek back prior to the Notre Dame game to recap these first 3 games and get us ready for that Notre Dame showdown. Um, and Cameron and I will be back later this week with our recap of week 2 of high school football and a look ahead to where Believeland will be for week 3. And we will talk to you then.
we had some good games this week. Better be ready.